a little bit of what I do, right? So director of strategy at Salesforce, it seems almost a little outdated in the sense that the world of technology is changing so rapidly. How can you plan? Our job is to inform our leaders and our top customers around what is the future of technology, how we think about the future, how we've kind of managed to have this kind of explosive growth of this company. And what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit of how we think differently about the future. And I'm a futurist, so I get to show you this boring text in every single slide that I do that says, don't buy anything off of what I'm about to say. There's a lawyer somewhere that's happy that I'm doing this because, again, I'm a futurist. My job's beyond what we have publicly available. All right, so at Salesforce, you hear a lot of people talk around the fourth industrial revolution, right? This is a fundamental change of what's going on with AI, and it's why we're all here talking about this, right? This is a technology that is disruptive to everything before it in a cumulative way. And what we mean by that, it's just as dramatic as how you can think how your computer changed when you had the internet, right? Or how much social media completely changed this device, right? When you think about AI, it is a multiplier to everything before it. And it will fundamentally change how we understand technology and how we interact with it. But my job, when I talk with customers, is hit them with a little bit of reality to say that we're far away from the idea of a completely human AI that tackles every single problem, that puts us out of a job. This discussion of what are we going to do as human beings, that's not anywhere near term, right? This is decades away. We're actually working on a project with DARPA and the United States government to talk about mapping out the human brain. And we're going to be doing this initiative where we're going to map out a cubic millimeter of the brain down to the molecule level, and it's going to take 17 years. And that just shows a fundamental understanding that we really don't know how the human brain works to this point. So having a general AI that can tackle any single problem is very far off from the future. So when we talk about AI, and you hear AI anywhere in the news or what's going on in this time period, we really talk about this idea of narrow or weak AI, right? This concept of machine intelligence. And you're going to hear Avi and some other people come up later and talk about this, but what it really means, if I were to easily explain it, it's if I were to give you 5,000 pictures of a cat, and then I give you another picture, you can tell me with a pretty good certainty if it's a cat or not, right? That's machine intelligence. It's a real easy understanding of taking vast amounts of information, running it through like an evolutionary learning model, and then asking a simple question. But that in itself is completely changing a lot of industries. I could probably spend an entire hour talking about what's going on in healthcare in this space. We have the luck of working with Kaiser and United Healthcare and all these giants of the industry, and we talk about what's happening here, and it's phenomenal. This is everything from drug discovery to personalizing drugs for your body using CRISPR to what MetaMind did, which was actually one of the first companies that Salesforce acquired in the AI space. What they did was MetaMind found out that if you go into the doctor and you say, I have a headache, you get a CT scan or an MRI in a hospital, you get sent out to some doctor's iPad somewhere in the world who's got 200 of them in a list, and he's just going through saying if everybody's okay. And the problem is if you came in with a brain bleed or you have an aneurysm at that moment, you're at the bottom of the list. That's a really bad story, right? You have to be actually in surgery within 7 minutes or you had like a 95% fatality rate. So all they did was they took AI to sort that list. It's real simple. They just tried to identify a problem, and they brought it to the top of the doctor to say, hey, this is what you need to look at that moment. Saved, I think there were roughly about 100 lives per month saved just by that simple algorithm. And there's a huge amount of change in this industry, and even myself, I probably had the most futuristic experience of my life in healthcare recently. Last July, I actually went through brain surgery. I was having a hard time sleeping. When I would lay down, my left ear would ring, and the doctor's like, it's stress. You need to stop drinking coffee. I'm like, this is Silicon Valley. That's what everybody does. We need to figure out something else. So I got an MRI, and they checked it out, and they found out I had acoustic neuroma, which is a little small tumor on my hearing and balance nerve just outside my brainstem. And I got sent down to the newest Kaiser on the planet, which is in San Diego Medical Center. Amazing team, and I went through 13 hours of a surgery with 2 neurosurgeons in the room. The third was reviewing it from New York. And I went into an ICU that had an AI striker bed that would mold and move me, a lot like the alt space type stuff that we're looking at, right? Intelligent furniture. They had an 80-inch touchscreen. They were using voice technology on all the lapels of the nurses. It's incredibly amazing because this procedure normally would have taken 2 to 3 weeks for me to stay in the hospital. It would have been about 6 months before I would have had my balance back because they removed my balance nerve. And I might have lost my hearing, about a 50% chance. Now with AI, and this is after only a year and a half of them adding AI to all these different stages within Kaiser, I was in and out of the hospital in 3 days, and I was on a flight back home up here to North Bay, and then I actually was back in the office in 4 weeks. And I'm perfectly fine hearing balance, everything else like that, right? So when you think about what you can do, which is that simple piece of technology, you can drastically change a lot of things with that simple piece. So what will the future look like? There's going to be, everybody's going to try to figure out how to have you connected to your customer in a new way. When we're talking about startups and, this new idea of how do you connect with the customer, we talk about at Salesforce and understanding every single company does not want to be disrupted. They don't want another player to come into your space. So to do that, you have to create an individual connection to a customer. If you're a B2B company, you will be a B2B2C company. Or we start calling it today the B2I company, right? The business to an individual, right? You are obsessed with the customer because you need to understand that so much to make sure that you're sticky with that individual. And there's going to be a whole lot of new devices. You've seen one of them here, and I encourage you guys to go check out Exit Reality. Augmented reality is actually a little bit further along, or further behind, I should say, because production-wise, it's a little bit harder to answer that problem. And these are at the very beginning of a tech cycle, right? If you were to think of any single technology, think about cell phones, right? They started the size of suitcases. They were for the military and the rich, only the early adopters. We're still a couple of waves away from these things kind of fundamentally changing what we think of. But bioprocessors are actually going through a really dramatic change. I recently met with a company that has these new ingestible apple peels. And what they do is they help monitor your body connected to your phone while you're out and about. So imagine if you were saying, I have a really bad flu, I go check into a hospital. Normally you're there for 2 days, but they don't really need you there that long. They just want to pump you full of some liquid, and then they need to kick you out. So what they do is they give you these apple peels that you ingest every 2 days, and they have a little sensor in it. It connects to your phone, and it gives you all the vital signs of that individual while you're out and about. So you can be at home resting, binge watching Netflix while you're actually being treated by the hospital. And this is not going to be a fad. It's not going to be, competing with your steps with other people with Fitbit. You're going to have these type of things to help you monitor your body and have a healthier lifestyle. Everybody wants to be healthier, but they need to figure out the way to do it. We're going to start doing it by having that kind of dashboard of a car for our own bodies. And that's going to probably play out in the next 2 years because we're already starting to see a lot of companies start doing this. And I always share this example because I love it, and it just shows a little bit personal touch of like what can happen with technology when you use it right. I have 2 boys that are autistic that are 7 and 9, and they are part of a research project at Stanford called Autism Glass. And what this is my boys wear Google Glass to school. And these glasses have a camera that's on at all times, and they use an AI to self-identify everybody they look at, but then it uses emotional intelligence training. So if my boys look at anybody, it will say the name, and it will say the emotion that person's experiencing. This is going from hundreds and thousands of hours of therapists. It's incredibly expensive for any healthcare provider in the world to $100 pair of glasses that they could give these phones around the world, and it completely changes the life for my kids. You can imagine this technology playing out in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different spaces that this would be incredibly valuable, like everything from the hospitality industry to what happens when you walk into like an amusement park to, you can imagine the business world. If I meet you today and I met you last time at the Tech Bay Area Advocates, I apologize because I'm terrible at names and faces. If I had a pair of glasses like this that could just say your name, your job title, I would pay thousands of dollars for that technology, and that will completely change the idea of how you interact and connect with other people. And that's not a fantasy. This is the stuff that these major companies are playing with right now. So in about a year or 2, you're going to start having these ideas of helping you connect with people and just help you break the ice. Hearables have gone through a fundamental change. They do live translation. This isn't entirely new, but there's actually a new slice to this, is that Google has recently kind of announced some stuff on the research team around using AI to alter sound. And the implications of this are gigantic. Everything from, for my kids that can kind of freak out about if they have a fire engine run by, if they had earplugs in that basically cut that noise out, but they could still conversate with everybody else. You can imagine a drastic change. You can imagine being at, one Market Street restaurant where it's incredibly loud and crazy, and there's all these business individuals trying to understand and have a VC conversation over the table, and you don't understand anybody. Those kind of ideas of just cutting out the crowd, cutting out the human beings, using that to alter sound is going to be a pretty fundamental change too. And that research from the new Google Pixel earbuds will probably be out in about 6 months at this point. So. Neurocontrol, I talked about last time, but this time I want to add a little bit because if you didn't see this on 60 Minutes or know what this thing is, this is probably one of the most important pieces for neurocontrol in the next year. This is a project for MIT, and it's phenomenal because what they figured out, this is called the Alter Ego headset, and what it does is if I think about talking, I send that signal from my brain down my jawline, and this tool can read it with a 92% accuracy rate, even if I don't open my mouth. So if I think about talking, I can actually talk to Alexa and to Google and everything else with my mouth closed. This will allow you to ask those questions to Siri and Alexa when you're on BART and you can't understand anybody around you, or you're talking about something private and you want to answer your computer about it. It was an amazing demo. They had 2 guys on stage. They had a whole conversation with their mouths closed in front of everybody on stage. And they would also poke jokes at each other and saying do you know the capital of whatever? And he would sit there for a second and go yeah, I know the capital. And it's because he asked the question and it was fed into his ear. Right? So you can think about how this will change a lot of what we understand of voice, because you'll be able to use your inner voice to still communicate. And it also, I will add to this is a fundamental piece to understanding neurocontrol that does not read the mind. You can imagine the public freaking out of people understanding how you read your mind and what you're going to use that information for. This is something that has to travel down your mouth that you're going to actually say. So they kind of get around the idea of I can get you to say something that I can understand, but I'm not going to be reading what you're thinking. Right? And that's the next step. It's a very important one for us to understand this. And all of this stuff plays together for this idea of a digital assistant. I meet with executives all the time. A lot of them sometimes have armies of executive assistants that manage their time, their schedules, their travel, prep them for the meeting they go into. They let them know you don't need to have this conversation. They prep you and make you so much more productive at your job. That will play out for everybody in their entire work schedule from top to bottom, from every individual, but even in your personal life. You can imagine when you're doing travel, maybe 10 years ago, there was this whole idea of a travel, assistant that helped you out and manage your travel when you're booking a, vacation. Now we do all the work. Now we have to figure out the hotels and the flights and all this other junk to just get there. If I had a travel assistant that said, hey, I'm taking my family to Orlando for 4 days, what should I do? Here's my budget. And it just manages that whole process, right? That's what a lot of people are going to be aiming for the next couple of years, is that seamless ability of almost like the Amazon one click, but for every aspect of your life through those digital assistants. So in a day in a life, a story we tell is a little bit different this time, is that you can imagine in the morning you wake up, you tell Alexa, hey, I need to wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, but it's smart enough, it knows the weather, it knows traffic, it says, okay, I'm gonna wake you up at 7:30, and I'm gonna let you know today's your day, your doctor's gonna check up on you. So I need you to pop in one of those little ingestible sensors. And we're gonna help you out through the day, just let you know, connect you with your doctor immediately. And you can imagine throughout the whole day, this ingestible sensor is actually reading the energy levels in your body, and it notices you're getting a little bit cranky, you need some fruit, you need some better food in your body. Why don't you swing by one of those new grocery stores downstairs? And when you go down there, they're going to be a seamless experience, right? This is the idea that you're going to walk in, pick up something, and walk out. But a lot of people don't understand that they're going to have these ideas of a personalized advertisement and personalized study of what you're going to do within the store. Right? So I'm going to walk into the store and it's going to be like, hey, I know you ate this last week. Why don't you try out this? Or your friends have been talking about this. This might be a good option for you. Or, we need to get you on a little bit better of a schedule. Don't pick up the cookies, pick up the bananas, right? Like we're going to do things that help you make a better lifestyle choice. But you're going to walk outside and there's all these, Girl Scouts that are going to slam into you and say, buy some cookies. And you're immediately going to go, oh no, this doesn't match my plan. The assistant's going to go like, you know what? Don't worry about it, right? Pick up the cookies, use your Bitcoin payment or whatever you want to use to connect to them. Don't worry about it because there's something amazing we're going to have you try out later on that'll make it a little bit fun to work out. And your doctor at that point is going to check up on you and say, you know what, you're doing good. Don't worry about it. I'm looking at this dashboard of all the information of what's going on in your body, your history, how you're sleeping. And you know what, just keep up with what you're doing, but have some fun. Right? So at the end of the day, you're going to go see something a little bit like this, where it's going to say, okay, there's a new game at the virtual reality gym, and you're going to have a little bit more fun instead of running boringly on a treadmill or lifting weights. You're going to be competing with your friends. You're going to have this, experience that every single, Gen Z and millennial is going to want to thrive into and have a more in-depth experience socially while they're working out, and that's going to be done by these virtual technologies. So, one thing I want to talk about too is that. There's a new concept that a lot of people are starting to see echoes of, and this is the idea of the personal data economy. And how we talk about this Salesforce, this is kind of something a little bit new. You've heard about the typical sharing economies at Airbnb. You've heard about the crowd economy. This story is actually my favorite one in the world because it's the General Mills Cereal Innovation Network. And basically what it does is my kids can say, we should have peanut butter taco cereal. And they can throw out the idea out there and it gets voted on by the community and then they make cereals off of it. And they've done phenomenal work there. And you can know the algorithm economy and the importance of data, but the personal data economy is for the companies that are figuring out that there's a whole lot of information about every single user out there, and the companies that are not open and transparent about what they're doing with it or the benefit they're providing are going to fall away, right? This is why you're starting to see the Facebooks and everything else in the news, because there's a lot of information out there and you need to use it ethically. And the only way to be ethical about it is to be open about what you're actually doing with this information. So there are some companies out there that are figuring this out. A little cut off, but I mean, just as a raise of hands, how many people here are using MoviePass? Right? Okay. Yeah, we're still seeing some. All right. So what MoviePass is, if you don't know about it, MoviePass, or Cinemark, and for our UK folks, MoviePass is a way that you can basically have a subscription model where you say $8 a month, you can go to the movies as much as you want. And everybody's like, well, that's a little bit crazy, right? It's about $12, $13 to go to the movies. Like, how can I actually do this? Well, the reason is you are agreeing that I'm going to share my history of where I go to the movies with the movie studios, which are paying hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out what movie you might go to, or the theaters, which never knew who was going to the theaters, right? They just knew tickets sold, and that's really about it. So these guys kind of figured out the new model of saying, I'll feed you all that research and data, and you get the benefit of it. It's the same thing that Intuit, MIT, and like patients like me are doing. Companies that are just open and transparent about, this is what I need the information for, this is the benefit that I actually provide you. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about blockchain, because I think it's an important piece of the personal data economy. You heard a little bit about it here, and I could probably get really too technical for a crowd. So I'm going to try to be as simple and easy and talk a little bit about what the business impact of this is, because a lot of customers come to us all the time and say, like, what is blockchain? Why should I even pay attention to this? And we really kind of fundamentally, it's easy to understand. It's a distributed ledger. It's the idea of taking the records of a company or records of a transaction and spreading it out, so you can get away from having trust or the single point of attack, like from where your data is. Think about a bank, right? All the information a bank has of all the transactions there. The blockchain technology allows you to spread that out over a bunch of individuals. The problem is, though, is that when everybody hears about blockchain, at least in my industry, everybody starts thinking about cryptocurrencies and what's going on with Bitcoin. And it's kind of giving it a little bit of a bad name, because cryptocurrencies are built upon blockchain, but blockchain is incredibly powerful technology. And cryptocurrencies have also got a little bit of media hype, right? They got a lot of people that are starting to think about investing in this, and you have Warren Buffett and Bill Gates saying, no, it's crazy. Like, there's a lot of things going out there and about trying to figure out what is making sense of this, when really the underneath technology is more important. It's really an important technology that you can build a lot of important things on. And I'm going to give two examples here of some recent ones that have just kind of stuck out for me. The first one is really the Hyperledger project, and it's an open consortium. It started with a Linux Foundation, and it spread out to basically every major financial institution and every major software company is all part of this. It's an open incubator for the innovation behind blockchain, because everything that kind of powers Bitcoin and a lot of these other new cryptocurrencies, it needs to go through a little bit of a maturity curve, right? Just like I said, cell phones kind of changed, and virtual reality and other things are going to change. Blockchain needed to do the exact same thing. That's why it's been a couple of years, and it started with the early adopters, and it's now starting to get to the point where it's mature enough that companies can look at it. Another example, though, is a share. This has been something that I've met with most of the media companies around the world. I was just down with Disney leadership and meeting with the Imagineers and a bunch of other groups. And Referium scares the advertising and marketing group very much. And I want to share this because if you don't know about this and you're running a company and you're thinking about advertising and marketing, this is going to kind of fundamentally change things. What Referium did is said, okay, I see what's happening in the video game industry where the gamers are not paying attention to the billboards, the magazines, the 30-second ads. They're just joining that all out. And it's not scalable for me to find the hottest person on YouTube or Twitch to stream my game. I need to figure out a better way to do this. So what they did was they figured out this new way of connecting blockchain and paying people for their referrals or for the influence they have. So here's the example. So let's say I'm, one of the big games I've got, a brand new Batman game, and I spend $50 million making the game, and then I have $100 million to market it out there. Well, all that money goes to advertisers and to marketers and CMOs, and not the people actually spending their time doing this. So what you do is you said, I'm going to buy some cryptocurrency of this Referium. I'm going to spend $100,000. I'm going to throw it out into the market. Whoever streams, whoever shares, whoever creates content gets to mine out of that big piggy bank, right? So if I'm an individual and I have 1,000 people watching me on Twitch playing this game, then I am mining with 1,000 people behind me, and I'm getting paid to market for you, right? Or actually the more interesting one too is the individual gets paid. So if you just go onto Twitch or to YouTube and you're starting to watch people doing PUBG or Fortnite or all the big games going on right now, you get paid in Referium just for watching, right? That's the idea of change of advertisement, right? If I tell you today, go watch the Marvelous Miss Maisel, television show on Amazon, it's amazing, it's award-winning, and I gave you a link to do it, and then you binge watch it for 8 hours, I should get paid to do that, right? That's the new idea of getting the social network to kind of spread the information and to actually pay people for their time, because that's the most invaluable resource in the next couple of years, because it's going to get more crazy and more chaotic. Having ways to pay people for their attention is actually the way to do it, not to spread and shotgun the world. The other uses of technology that are kind of important for blockchain, I mean, you've probably heard about supply chain. It's one of the most fundamental examples, and we're starting to see this roll out from almost every major transportation and logistics company and supply chain company, because it's the fundamental idea that I need to connect all these different systems that are not playing together, they're not on the same database or cloud, and they need to share the information of where the package is, what's the conditions of it, who signed off on it, et cetera. It's just a ledger that allows you to keep track of your inventory out there. The other one's interesting too is that companies are starting to figure out that they can kind of rethink education with blockchain. There's this idea of the ivory tower that it takes 4 years to get your degree at an institution, but that is just a series of classes and events and other pieces of experience that you could connect through blockchain inside or outside of a university, and then that could be the new LinkedIn, right? That's the idea of sharing that education model, right, of having all the history together on a blockchain that anybody else can see and open and public and transparent. And this last one, I won't do it justice at all, but it's actually really interesting. We spent quite a lot of time recently looking into quantum computing and how it's going to change things in like 10, 15 years. You want to know about that, ask. But blockchain is actually a fundamental piece of quantum computing for security longer term. Part of that is because when you have quantum computers that can break all the security for most banks and Bitcoin and everything else in about 10 years, they kind of have to rethink things. Blockchain will be the way that they secure their networks from quantum computing using things like entanglement. So. We're going through these kind of waves of AI right now. Everything has to go through this kind of maturity chain, right? We had the first wave, which is the basic of TurboTax, right? The idea that you have just intelligence that the programmer put into the system. We're now in machine intelligence, but we're getting really close to the idea of contextual AIs. And that's using like things like capsule networks and other kinds of advanced versions of deep learning that allow you to actually understand the context of the situation, right? That's a little bit of what Google did on stage with the Google Duplex, right? They have to understand what's going on in the conversation. It's not just as easy to understand what the person said. You have to understand how they said it, if they were sarcastic, if they were funny, if they're pausing, if it was somebody in the background. There's all kinds of things you have to pull out of that to make an actual conversational AI. And a lot of companies are paying attention to this right now because of everything in the news, right? You need to make sure that you're open and transparent about what's going on in AI. There's a lot of things that are going on in China that are kind of scaring a lot of people and thinking about what's going to be going on in AI in the future. So a lot of people are joining up groups like OpenAI or the Algorithmic Justice League. It's still the cheesiest name ever. And they basically, openly meet. They share all their white papers together. And there was even recently a company that released a white paper on AI, but they put it behind a $20 paywall. And 1,500 AI professors around the world basically boycotted that company and said, nope, you're not going to do that. So people are very important about making sure everything is open, everybody understands where this is going, because if somebody goes as an outlier, they're going to be kind of shunned by the community. And what does this mean for work and life? This is probably one of the most important slides I show to people in the government and in the media and the rest, is we've done a ton of work figuring out how does technology affect the world and life. And because you're going to hear right now that everything's going to be automated, everything's going to go away. Every wave of technology creates more jobs. There's more people in the workforce than there's ever been before. We actually added over 100 million people here in the US in the last 60 years into the workforce. And every single time, every single wave, like in the, ATMs came out, everybody said the banking world's gonna die. No. You go to, the spreadsheet software, everybody said, well, the financial institution, that's all gonna go away. Everybody can do all these fancy equations. No, nobody understands half of them. So it's not gonna go anywhere anytime soon. So when you think about technology, it's really thinking about how the job will change and not how it will go away. And that's because there are pieces of your job that are gonna be automated, right? There are pieces, if you do anything with data processing, data collection, or you're doing predictable physical work, that's stuff that's easily automated because there's a lot of information there that you can use to model something out and do something faster. But there's a lot of things AI will not do for decades, right? We talk about unpredictable physical work. We joke that the plumber is never going to be replaced because every single time somebody comes to a house with the plumber has to have a whole human conversation. Every sink is completely different. They have no idea what the problem is. They have to diagnose the whole thing. You open up the sink, there's always something different at every person's house, right? There's not a way to have the data that models that for a very, very long time. So those are the things that people are going to be focusing on is human conversations and applying expertise, things that AI just can't do. And there's a lot of companies that are focused on this, right? Analytic allows cancer treatment, which is diagnosis quickly, which is a really interesting one. My boss talks a lot about this because he had something that had to be removed on his shoulder, and it's like you have 3 weeks to figure out if you have cancer. Nobody wants that experience, right? Well, Analytic is like using AI to read through 95% of the cells really quickly, and then tells the doctor these are the only ones you really need to look at. And those are the ones that you're going to be able to answer somebody saying, coming out an hour later and say, hey, this is what our diagnosis is, right? So using AI to speed the process up, but you still have a doctor at the end. And there's a lot of new jobs that are going to be coming out. I mean, we talked about people in the later years of their life, understanding that we're going to have people living longer. There's a lot of money in spending that area of the, helping people at later time in their life, especially with all technology. And that even feeds into this idea of an IoT consultant. We talk about them as smart home consultants. You can imagine right now, like I've got Alexas and Google Homes like throughout my house. I've got a refrigerator that's starting to talk to me and a microwave that now has Alexa in it. And I'm just trying to understand how to even plug these things all in together. You can imagine most of the public cannot do that without hours of work. It's going to be trying to figure out how do you plan for the future home. There are going to be companies that are going to try to address that. Right? There's a lot of companies that are going to try to figure out to be the next Geek Squad, that they're going to show up in your house and say, like, I'll set you up. Don't worry about it. So, and the other thing for the students in the room, I get asked all the time, should I put my son into AI? Like, should you go into computers? Should you go into programming? What I tell every single time, and I've done speeches for colleges around the world, focus on learning. Because right now, most adults in this room, you maybe spend 10 to 15% of your day just learning. You were trying to keep up with what's going on with competitors. You're learning about some new tech words, some big announcement came out of Facebook or whatever. You're just trying to keep up with everything. That is going to get much higher. Right? And they say in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to be spending 20 to 25% of your job just trying to learn what's actually going on in the business world. And that's a very important skill, right? So focus on learning and relearning and being creative to understand when you're wrong. There's a lot of importance there that's not just knowing the statistics that they're going to tell you need to memorize. And this is why this is a little bit crazy. What I have to do is just kind of map out what are all the different companies in AI and education, basically everywhere, right? Because everybody understands there's a whole lot of money in figuring out how do you train people for this next generation. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution for AI, it is actually a revolution. You have to retrain a lot of people to move to the next job. To do that, you want to use AI to make smarter, intelligent ways to enable an entire workforce. And this is why we just did Trailhead at our company. And it was, ironically, when customers ask about this, was it a plan for us to start to get into education and go out into the world of this? This was actually our own problem. And I say that because we were growing 30% a quarter every single quarter for 16 years. And when you're doing that, you have to train people on like, hey, we just suddenly made an acquisition of MuleSoft. What is MuleSoft? We have 5,000 salespeople that suddenly need to understand what this company is, right? Like keeping people up to date with how fast our company moves, we needed a tool internally to do that. And we had to train the culture of our company, and we had to make sure everybody was up to date and everybody was behind the same message and values. And so this last year, we just turned it into a product, and it's done phenomenal because literally every single company comes to us and says, this is my problem. Like I have a new workforce, I need to keep people up to date, and nobody wants to do the boring corporate learning, videos that you had to do 20 years ago. So, and this is the last thing I'll end with, just to kind of nail this down because, when people talk about the future a little bit, you're going to have the inclination to be more negative about the future. They've actually done studies on fMRI studies on the brain, mapping out when you think about the future. And if you think about yourself a year and a half in the future, it's actually a stranger. Like your brain fires that person as not you as an individual. And it's all the reasons why people procrastinate, they don't save, they don't put money in their 401ks and all this other kind of stuff is because that is a stranger. And that person's going to mess things up and they're going to take my money and my time and it's not worth my effort to connect to that person. When thinking about the future, this is why the Westworlds, the Mad Maxes, the Black Mirrors, and Blade Runners, and everything else is incredibly popular right now, and there's not a brand new Jetsons on Netflix, right? There's a problem because we think about technology and how it's all going to go away. But I am lucky enough to work for Peter Schwartz. He heads up strategy for Salesforce. He's now our Chief Future Officer. Coolest title. And what he gets to think about is he's done things like he helped write Minority Report and War Games and Deep Impact and all these future versions that we all thought about was actually today at this point. And he says, anytime somebody comes up with this quote, it's not new. This isn't new, right? Like this quote from Time Magazine about the elimination of all service and office jobs was in 1961. And we still had Russians in the news. It doesn't change, right? Like every single time it does this, and we go through the pattern recognition, right, of understanding how technology is going to be bad, it's really hard and difficult to think about how it's going to be positive and help humanity. So I encourage you, when you're thinking about this and you're doing your pitches and you're getting in front of companies and you're just talking to people about what you do, understand the positive side of what you do, because that's an important culture to push around a very negative technology culture. So, and that will be my end of the keynote. So thanks, guys.